If the person you love most became the very key to your downfall, would you still choose them or set them free? Welcome, untamed hearts. You've returned to Tales by Jenny Moon, a place where the wild waits, where every heartbeat can be hunted, and every touch carries danger. Tonight's story will stir your senses, tempt you with desire, and bind you to alphas, fated mates, and the hunger that never lets go. But remember, every choice has its cost. Mark your presence with the pack, like, comment, subscribe, share, so the night knows you're here and the stories know where to find you. Stay close, untamed heart. The night has already chosen you.
The moon rose swollen and red, hanging like a wound above Dregmar Keep. Its light spilled across the stone towers and battlements, staining the banners in crimson fire. The blood moon, omen of destiny, seal of power, and judge of kings. Every 100 years it burned in the sky, and every 100 years it demanded a vow. The courtyard of the keep groaned under the weight of thousands. Nobles pressed forward in silks embroidered with silver wolves and crimson thorns, each family crest glinting like knives under torchlight. Behind them, omegas and commoners craned their necks, packed shoulder to shoulder, sweat and anticipation hanging thick in the air. Wolves in beast form prowled the edges of the gathering, fur bristling, golden eyes catching the firelight, jaws slick with saliva as if they too knew a feast of fate was coming. The night was so still that the crackle of torches sounded like thunder. At the dais stood Tavian, Alpha King of Dregmar. Tall, broad-shouldered, built as though the gods had sculpted him for war. His presence filled the square without a crown, without a word. He wore only a black wolf pelt across his shoulders, its fur gleaming in the moonlight like spilled ink. The crown rested elsewhere, locked within the vault of vows. Tonight, only the bond could call it forth. The king's eyes, storm gray, restless, swept the crowd, and for a heartbeat he looked less like a ruler and more like a man caught in chains unseen. His jaw tightened as the elder council approached, their robes whispering across the stone like dry leaves. Chancellor Vare, gaunt and sharp, raised the scroll of prophecy. His voice slashed the silence. When the blood moon rises, the Alpha King shall bind with his fated mate. Only through the bond will the throne endure. Only through the bond will the kingdom survive. The words echoed off the marble walls of the keep. Thousands held their breath. Women straightened their gowns, alphas lifted their chins, every noble family praying the moon's choice would elevate their bloodline. Tavian's chest rose once, deep and measured. He had endured years of whispers, that his reign was fragile, that he ruled on borrowed strength, that without a Luna, his line would falter. Tonight would silence them all, or break him. The elder unrolled the final parchment. His voice faltered on the name as though the moon itself mocked tradition. The moon has chosen Mira of the Lowborn. The courtyard split open with gasps. At the far edge of the crowd, a young woman froze. Mira. She stood among servants and tradesfolk, plain in a faded gown of dusk blue linen, her shawl patched twice at the shoulder. A girl who scrubbed halls and fetched water from wells. Her dark hair was braided simply, her hands calloused from work, her scent quiet, unthreatening, unmistakably Omega. The crowd roared with outrage. "Impossible!" a noble alpha snarled, his voice carrying above the din. "An Omega as queen? An insult to the throne. She'll weaken him. She'll destroy us all." Guards surged forward to surround Mira, spears flashing. The sea of bodies parted reluctantly as she was drawn toward the dais. Every step felt like walking into the maw of a beast. Her legs trembled, but her chin lifted, a flicker of defiance hardening her features, and then her gaze met Tavian's. The king's eyes, storm gray, searching, locked on hers as if she were not a servant, not a mistake, but a cipher written in blood. For a moment the world hushed, the crowd's fury dimming into background noise. When she reached the dais, The elders bowed slightly, leaving her alone before the king. Tavian studied her in silence as though testing the weight of fate itself. His jaw worked once, then he lowered his voice so only she could hear. "An omega," he murmured, almost tasting the word. "They will hate you for this." Mira's throat tightened, but she forced her voice steady. "I did not ask for their hate, or for this fate, no." His eyes sharpened, piercing. But the moon never errs. The space between them tightened, charged, as though invisible threads pulled them closer. Mira could feel his heat, the weight of his aura pressing against her skin like a storm about to break. Her breath caught, her body instinctively trembling under the pressure of his alpha power, yet something within her refused to bow. Tavian leaned closer, his voice roughened by something he did not name. "Hug me once before the ceremony, so I know this bond is real." Mira's eyes widened. Around them, the crowd seethed with impatience, but for this moment there was only him, the most powerful alpha alive, asking for something absurdly human. Her body hesitated, frozen between fear and defiance. Then, with trembling arms, she stepped forward. Tavian enveloped her. His warmth was a fortress, his heartbeat a war drum against her ear. The moment her arms closed around him, the bond flared, heat spiraling through her chest, searing, alive. And then it happened. Tavian's breath stilled. His vision split open like a wound, blood slicking the red stare, shadows moving like knives, the elder council whispering over his corpse. He staggered, breaking the embrace, his jaw clenched tight. Mira stumbled back, confusion etched across her face. "What did you see?" she whispered, searching his storm-gray eyes. But Tavian said nothing. His silence was sharper than any blade. The crowd erupted into renewed chaos, voices crashing like waves. "She bewitched him! The bond is cursed! This is no mate, this is a weapon!" Above them, the blood moon burned brighter, dripping light across stone and skin alike. It watched as though amused by the havoc it had wrought. And in the midst of it all, Tavian's gaze never left Mira. His hands flexed at his sides, torn between claiming and casting her aside, between destiny and ruin. The night had chosen. Whether Dregmar would endure that choice, or burn by it, none yet knew. The crowd had not quieted since Mira's name was called. Even as guards dispersed the gathering, fury crackled through Dregmar Keep like a fire that refused to die. Nobles spat their outrage, omegas whispered in fear, and every rival alpha smelt weakness like blood in water. The blood moon blazed above, indifferent, casting the courtyard in a scarlet haze that seemed to deepen every shadow. Tavian had dismissed the court with a single thunderous order, his voice rolling through the square like an avalanche. Yet inside the walls of the high hall the storm continued, confined now to whispers behind carved doors and candle-lit corridors. The elder council convened in the Chamber of Oaths, a place where tapestries of wolf kings past hung heavy with dust and memory. There, Chancellor Vare stood beneath the cracked mosaic of the first alpha, his skeletal fingers tightening on the staff of office. His face, pale as parchment, carried the satisfaction of a man whose doubts had been proven right. "This is folly," he hissed, voice echoing like venom against stone. "A king who binds himself to an omega disgraces the very foundation of Dregmar. The bloodlines will revolt." Beside him, Matron Helise sat like a carved idol, her features sharp, her robes heavy with silver embroidery that marked her as keeper of the blood codes. She tapped one long nail against the armrest of her chair, each click deliberate as if measuring the beat of war drums. "You saw what I saw," she murmured. The girl did nothing, yet the king faltered. He staggered as though struck. That was not chance. Vare's eyes narrowed. "You believe she bewitched him?" "I believe," Helise said softly, "that the moon has delivered us not a queen, but a curse." Their gazes locked, unspoken agreement passing between them. Already the shape of their schemes began to form, seeds of rumor to be sown, alliances to be forged, blades to be sharpened. In another wing of the keep, Tavian stripped the wolf pelt from his shoulders and let it fall heavily onto the table. He pressed his palms to the cold stone, breath measured, jaw taut. His counselors demanded answers, his people demanded certainty, and his own mind replayed the vision again and again. Blood on the red stair, knives in the dark, whispers of betrayal. Mira stood a few paces away, silent, her hands clasped so tightly the knuckles whitened. The torches threw her shadow long against the wall, frail in form yet stubborn in stance. Finally, Tavian spoke without looking at her. "They will tear you apart for this." Mira lifted her chin. "And if I walk away?" The king's head snapped toward her, storm-gray eyes flashing. "You cannot. The moon does not grant choices. It binds." Her lips parted as if to argue, but she closed them again. In the silence, the sounds of the keep drifted through the high windows, the restless shuffle of guards, the mutter of courtiers who dared not speak too loudly, the howl of a wolf carried on the night wind. The entire kingdom seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see if their king would stand tall or fall. The next morning, the courtyards of Dregmar were alive with more than gossip. Rival alphas had arrived, their entourages crowding the gates like predators circling wounded prey. Armand Voss, broad as a bear and draped in armor polished to mirror brightness, laughed openly when he heard the news. "A king bound to an Omega?" he sneered to his captains. "I could snap her neck with one hand. And this is the bloodline meant to guard us?" Kestrel Thorn was subtler, his smile sharp as a dagger hidden in velvet. Handsome, with hair black as raven wings and eyes the color of midnight, he charmed the nobles as he spread whispers through the halls. "I mean no disrespect," he said smoothly. "But how long before Tavian's bond softens his edge? An Omega queen. It is unheard of. Perhaps unnatural." Every word seeded doubt. Every glance eroded Tavian's image of strength. Mira felt the weight of those whispers as she moved through the keep. Servants who once greeted her with nods now looked away. A child dropped a basket when she passed, staring as though she were a specter. Even the guard's eyes slid past her, not hostile but wary, as though she carried contagion. It was in the healer's wing that Mira first heard the name of her fate spoken aloud. She had gone there seeking quiet, but found instead the soft murmur of Naya Wren, an Omega healer whose hair was threaded with silver though her face remained young. Naya was grinding herbs, the scent of bitterroot and sage heavy in the air. She did not look up when Mira entered. Instead, she said, "You walk with a shadow behind you." Mira frowned. "Do you know who I am?" Naya's smile was faint, almost sad. "The whole kingdom knows. The Omega the moon crowned." Mira's throat tightened. "Then you know what they say, that I will ruin him." Naya's hands stilled. Slowly she raised her gaze, eyes dark as forest soil, steady and unreadable. "The prophecy is older than Tavian, older than Dregmar. It speaks of the Omega who would not kneel." Mira stepped closer, her pulse quickening. "What does it say?" Naya leaned forward, her whisper almost a breath. "You are the prophecy's breath. Crown or ruin." The words struck Mira like a blade wrapped in silk. Her chest constricted, her breath shallow. "Which am I meant to be?" she asked, voice breaking. Naya shook her head. "The moon grants fate, child, but it does not grant answers. Crown or ruin. That choice will be yours." That night, Mira lay awake in her chamber. Through the narrow window, the blood moon glared down, its light bathing her skin in red. Tavian's storm-gray eyes haunted her, as did the weight of his embrace. She closed her eyes, and in the darkness she felt the truth settle like frost upon her heart. The kingdom did not fear her weakness. They feared her power, and somewhere in the Chamber of Oaths, Chancellor Vare and Matron Helise whispered their plans, weaving threads of conspiracy meant to strangle both King and Omega before their bond could be sealed. The shadows in Dregmar Keep had begun to move. Night in Dregmar was rarely quiet. Even when the walls seemed to rest, the air carried a pulse. The tramp of sentries' boots, the distant howl of wolves along the riverbank, the hum of secrets too dangerous for daylight. In the eastern tower, Mira's chamber lay still. The fire in the hearth had burned low, casting long fingers of shadow across the stone walls. She sat by the narrow window, knees drawn to her chest, watching the blood moon's glow recede into a thin crescent. Her mind replayed Naya Wren's words again and again. You are the prophecy's breath, crown or ruin. Every syllable had coiled into her bones. Sleep did not come. Instead, a suffocating silence pressed against her ears, until she realized it was not silence at all. It was breathing, not hers. Her pulse stuttered. Slowly, Mira rose, the cold of the stones biting at her bare feet. She turned, eyes adjusting to the shadows near the door. There, too still to be mistaken for a trick of firelight, stood a figure cloaked in black, a blade gleaming faintly in his hand. For one suspended heartbeat, neither moved. Then the assassin lunged. Mira stumbled back, her cry lost in her throat. The blade sliced through the air close enough that she felt its whisper against her cheek. She scrambled for the bedpost, clutching it as the assassin's shadow swallowed her own. But before the knife could fall again, another figure exploded from the darkness, fast, brutal, silent as a hunting wolf. Steel clashed against steel, the sound sharp as thunder in the enclosed chamber. The intruder was thrown back, slammed against the wall. His dagger clattered to the floor, skittering toward Mira's feet. Her eyes, wide with terror, followed the motion, then rose to the man who had saved her. Soren Pike, the king's scout, known in whispers as the Ghost of the North. Broad-shouldered, scarred across the jaw, his gray cloak still damp with night air, his eyes, dark, vigilant, fixed on the assassin with lethal calm. You'll not touch her, Soren growled. The assassin spat, wrenching free a second knife from his sleeve. But Soren was faster. He moved with the precision of a man who had lived his life one strike away from death. A twist, a brutal shove, a sharp crack of bone, and the attacker collapsed, lifeless at Mira's feet. The silence that followed was heavier than before, broken only by Mira's ragged breaths. She stared at the body. The cloak bore no insignia, but around the man's wrist was tied a strip of crimson thread, the mark of Helisa's faction. Her stomach lurched. The council. Soren knelt swiftly, pressing 2 fingers to the assassin's neck, confirming what Mira already knew. He looked up at her then, his expression unreadable. You shouldn't have been left unguarded, he said. I was told I was safe here, Mira whispered, her voice trembling. Soren's jaw tightened. There is no safety in Dregmar, not for you. They disposed of the body quietly, lowering it down through a side passage where the shadows swallowed everything. When they returned, Mira lit another candle with shaking hands. Its glow flickered across her face, pale with fear but stiffened with resolve. Why? She asked suddenly. Why did you help me? You could have left. No one would know. Soren regarded her for a long moment. His scar caught the firelight, a reminder of countless battles survived. Because the king trusts me, and because... His voice dropped lower. I saw your face, Mira, when the moon chose you. You did not look hungry for power. You looked as though the world had ended. That is not the face of a usurper. Her throat tightened, words lost. Soren straightened, hand resting on the hilt of his blade. I swear on the ghost moon, until my last breath, I will not let them touch you. The oath hung heavy in the room, more binding than any council decree. Mira swallowed, unsure whether to feel relief or fear. That night, when sleep finally claimed her, it was no gentle reprieve. Mira dreamt of corridors dripping with shadows. Whispers filled the air, countless voices layered over one another, weaving words she could not fully understand. She walked barefoot through the endless dark, her hand trailing along cold stone, but the walls pulsed beneath her fingertips as though alive. "You are not hers," one voice hissed. "You are ours," another crooned. She turned corners and found mirrors instead of doors, each reflecting not her face but memories not her own. A child weeping as soldiers tore him from his mother, a warrior kneeling before a burning throne, a woman screaming as chains tightened around her wrists. Mira stumbled, clutching her ears, but the voices grew louder, seeping into her very marrow. "Crown or ruin, choose." Her scream echoed into the void, and she awoke with a start, drenched in sweat, the candle long dead. At dawn, Tavian found her pacing the chamber, hair disheveled, eyes wild. He reached for her shoulders. "Mira, what happened?" Her lips trembled, but the words tumbled out. "They tried to kill me. In the night. If not for Soren." Tavian's eyes flared with fury, his hands tightening on her arms. "Who?" She shook her head. "A faceless blade." But the council's thread was on him. The king's breath hissed through his teeth. "Ver," he spat. "Helise, they dare." "No," Mira interrupted, her voice sharper than she intended. "This is bigger than the council. Tavian, I heard them, in the shadows. Voices that weren't mine. They showed me things. Memories." He stared at her, torn between anger and disbelief. "Memories?" She nodded, clutching herself. "I think they belong to Dregmar, to its people, to its dead." The silence stretched. Then Tavian exhaled, slow and measured, his fury coiling into something colder. "They mean to break us before the bond is sealed," he said. "But if they think you are alone, they are wrong. You have me. And now, you have Soren." Mira wanted to believe him. She wanted to lean into the promise of his voice. But when she closed her eyes, she still heard them. The whispers, the chains, the screams. And beneath it all, a single truth pulsed louder than her heartbeat. The shadows were not done with her. Dawn broke over Dregmar, but the light that spilled through the eastern windows carried no warmth. The keep itself seemed to bristle, every stone tense, as if it too felt the weight of what was coming. Word had spread. An assassin dead in the night. Whispers of Omega witchery. By the time the sun climbed to its zenith, the courtyard was crowded with retainers, messengers, and noble packs. The sound was not a courtly murmur. It was the growl of wolves circling, ready to strike. Inside the Hall of Banners, the rival alphas gathered beneath the vaulted ceiling. Red and gold light fell from stained glass, painting their armor and cloaks in savage hues. Armand Voss stood with fists planted on the oak table, his bulk eclipsing half the chamber. Beside him, Kestrel Thorn lounged with serpent's ease, lips curved in a smile that never reached his eyes. Others stood in clusters, challengers, opportunists, men and women who had scented weakness in Tavian's rule and come to carve their claim. The throne at the far end remained empty. Tavian had not yet entered. The delay was calculated, but the rival alphas read it as hesitation. When the doors finally opened, silence struck the hall like a hammer. Tavian strode in, wolf pelt trailing, his crown heavy with black iron and moonstone. Mira followed 3 steps behind, her pale dress catching the light, fragile against the storm she was walking into. On either side of them, guards moved with disciplined precision, but it was clear even the soldiers felt the tension. Armand broke the silence first, his voice booming like a war horn. "Enough of this charade, Tavian. The kingdom cannot stomach an Omega queen. Break the bond before it is sealed. Choose a mate worthy of the throne." A murmur rippled through the hall. Several alphas nodded, their approval sharp and hungry. Kestrel's voice slithered in next, velvet-wrapped steel. "The moon may have chosen her, but a king's duty lies above fate. One decision could avert war, Tavian. Reject her, and Dregmar will remain unbroken." Mira felt the words like blows against her chest. She did not lift her eyes, Not yet, but her hands clenched at her sides, nails cutting into her palms. She knew what they wanted. Not her death, not yet. Her humiliation, her erasure. The king mounted the dais with deliberate calm, turning to face them. His eyes were storms barely leashed. When he spoke, his voice was steady, but Mira noticed, as she always did now, the faint tremor in his hand as he rested it against the throne's armrest. "You come into my hall," Tavian said, "demanding that I betray the moon's decree. You dress it as duty, but I see what it is: hunger, greed. You would tear Dragmar apart to fatten your own packs." Armand bristled. "Do not insult me, boy. My loyalty—" "Your loyalty," Tavian cut in sharply, "is worth nothing if it vanishes at the sight of an Omega." The chamber crackled with fury. Some growled, some shouted. But Tavian raised a hand and the uproar broke like waves against stone. His voice rang louder than the echoes of their anger. "She is mine," he declared, his gaze cutting through the room like a blade. "Whether Omega or not, the bond will not be broken, and if Dragmar burns for it, then so be it. I will rule the ashes with her at my side." The words hung in the air, shocking even Mira. The rival alphas recoiled, outrage spilling into snarls. Armand's fist slammed the table, splintering the wood. "You doom us all," he roared. Kestrel only smiled thinly, though the tension in his jaw betrayed his fury. "So be it," he said softly, almost a whisper. "But know this, Tavian. Every pack outside these walls will hear of this day. They will not bow to an Omega, and when they rise, you will stand alone." The gathering dissolved into shouts and growls, the clash of voices filling the chamber. Tavian stood motionless, unyielding, but his fingers trembled against the iron of the throne, betraying the cost of his defiance. Later, when the hall had emptied into chaos, Mira found him alone in the crown chamber. The torches burned low and the crown itself lay discarded on the table before him. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, hands covering his face. She stepped closer, hesitant. "Tavian." His voice came muffled through his palms. "They would see me torn apart for you." Her throat tightened. "Then let me go." He looked up sharply, storm-gray eyes blazing. "No, do not speak of that again." Mira's heart pounded. "I don't want to be your ruin. You are not ruin." His voice cracked on the words. He dragged a hand across his face, and in that moment she saw it clearly, the weight dragging at him, the cracks in the mask he wore before the world. Every speech, every command was carving him hollow. His hand still shook, though he clenched it into a fist as though sheer will could still it. "You don't understand," he said finally, softer now. "Every day I stand before them, I feel the edge beneath my feet. One misstep and the kingdom falls. And still, I must look them in the eye and make them believe I do not fear the fall. But I do, Mira. Gods help me. I do." The admission stole her breath. This was not the unbreakable Alpha King the people saw. This was the man beneath, cracking beneath the burden, clinging to the scraps of strength the crown demanded. Mira reached out, almost without thought, her hand brushing his trembling one. The tremor eased at her touch, not gone, but softened, steadied by something beyond power. Connection. "Then let me carry it with you," she whispered. For a long time he said nothing. The silence pressed heavy around them, the shadows watching, the world holding its breath. Finally, Tavian closed his hand around hers, not as king and subject, but as man and woman bound by something both cruel and undeniable. Outside, the wolves howled at the gates, and Dragmar's fate teetered on the edge of a blade. The wolves' howl still lingered in Mira's ears long after the echoes faded into the night. Sleep eluded her. She wandered the keep's quiet corridors, the weight of Tavian's words heavy in her chest. "She is mine, whether Omega or not." His defiance had silenced the rival alphas for now, but their rage would not stay buried. She felt it in the stones beneath her feet, in the charged air that prickled her skin. It was in that restless haze that she found herself once more in the healer's wing. Naya Wren was there as if expecting her, the chamber dimly lit by a single lantern. Herbs hung drying above the rafters, their shadows long and skeletal on the walls. "You came," Naya said without looking up, her hands busy grinding something into a fine powder. Mira hesitated at the doorway. "You told me I was the prophecy's breath. I need to know more." At that, Naya finally lifted her gaze. Her eyes carried the weight of someone who had seen too much, who carried truths like stones in her pockets. She set aside the mortar and wiped her hands slowly, deliberately, as though preparing herself to speak words that might not be taken back. "The prophecy is older than Dregmar," Naya murmured, voice low, steady. "It is carved into the oldest runes, whispered by wolves whose bones long turned to dust. It speaks of an Omega unlike any other, not meek, not bowed, but standing when all others demanded her knees touch the ground." Mira's breath caught. "What does it say?" Naya leaned forward, her whisper threading the silence. "The Omega who would not kneel will bring kingdoms to their knees." The words rooted themselves in Mira's chest like iron. She wanted to protest, to deny it, but the memory of the voices in the shadows gnawed at her. The visions that were not hers. The scream that had not left her lips but someone else's. Naya continued, her face grave. "Some believe it speaks of ruin, that your defiance will spark war. Others believe it speaks of a crown forged not of iron, but of choice. Either way, Mira, you are no longer invisible. You are the fulcrum on which Dregmar turns." Mira pressed her hands to her temples. "I never asked for this. I don't want it." Naya's expression softened, but her tone was firm. "Prophecies do not ask what we want. They only demand what we are." The room felt suddenly smaller, the air thick with inevitability. Mira turned and fled before Naya could say more, the words chasing her down the corridors like hounds. By dawn, she had made her decision. Her cloak was drawn tight around her shoulders as she slipped through the narrow servants' passage at the base of the keep. The world outside the walls stretched wide and dark, and for the first time since the blood moon, freedom glimmered before her like a fragile flame. She did not know where she would go, only that she had to leave. Tavian had stood before the rival alphas like a storm, but she could not allow herself to be the weight that broke him. If the prophecy promised ruin, she would not be the hand that delivered it. But as her hand touched the cold iron of the gate, a voice broke through the silence. "Mira." She froze. Tavian stepped out of the shadowed arch, wolf pelt thrown hastily over his shoulders. His crown was absent, but the storm in his eyes was not. He looked less like a king and more like a man caught between fury and desperation. "You would leave me?" His voice was low, raw. Mira swallowed hard, keeping her back to him. "You said it yourself. They would tear you apart for me. Every moment I stay here, your grip on Dregmar weakens. I won't be the reason you lose your throne." He moved closer, the sound of his boots deliberate against the stone. "Do you think I fear losing my throne?" Her breath hitched. She turned, finally meeting his gaze. Tavian stood before her, shadows clinging to the hard lines of his face. His hand, as always, trembled faintly at his side. But when he reached for her, it steadied, fingers curling around hers with unyielding strength. "I do not fear losing a crown," he said, voice sharp with conviction. "I fear losing you." The words cut through her defenses like steel through silk. For a moment, the weight of the prophecy, the council, the rival alphas, the whispers in the dark, all of it fell away. There was only the thundering of her heart, the heat of his hand in hers, and the raw truth in his eyes. "You don't understand," she whispered, voice breaking. "I hear them, Tavian, the voices in the shadows. They show me things I shouldn't see, memories that aren't mine. If Naya is right, if the prophecy is true, I could destroy everything you've built." Tavian stepped closer closing the last space between them. Then let it burn. Let it all burn, if it means I keep you. I would rather be king of ashes with you than king of kingdoms without you. Her chest constricted, breath catching on a sob she refused to release. No king should have spoken such words. No alpha should have confessed such weakness. And yet here he stood, trembling and unshaken, choosing her over the world. Slowly, Mira's hand lifted, brushing his jaw, her thumb grazing the faint stubble there. His eyes closed at the touch, as though the gesture itself was a reprieve from the endless war of crown and council. For the first time since the blood moon, she did not feel like prey. She felt like something else, dangerous, inevitable, and seen. Behind them, the first light of dawn pierced through the clouds, illuminating the keep's towers in red gold fire. It was a cruel reminder. The day ahead would bring more battles, more schemes, more wolves at their door. But in that fragile sliver of morning, as Tavian's hand held hers steady, Mira understood the truth the prophecy had hidden between its words. Perhaps the Omega who would not kneel did not mean ruin alone. Perhaps it meant she was meant to stand. The sun's rise over Dregmar was a cruel thing. It painted the keep in brilliance as if light could banish shadows, when in truth the shadows only grew sharper in its glare. Mira woke to the echo of Tavian's words, still clinging to her. I fear losing you. They had haunted her sleep, stirring dreams of crowns shattering into ash and wolves bowing before her as fire licked the horizon. When she jolted awake, her pulse still raced as if she had run through battlefields. The keep itself seemed unsettled. Servants whispered in corners, eyes darting to Mira as though she carried a storm inside her skirts. Guards stiffened when she passed, not in the courteous way one respected a future queen, but in the brittle posture of men who feared what they could not name. By midday, the unease had thickened into something tangible. A meeting was called. One Mira had not been meant to attend, but Tavian insisted she sit at his side. The High Council assembled in the Hall of Ironwood, a chamber vast enough to echo every heartbeat. Carved wolf standards loomed along the walls, reminders of ancient law and blood-bound hierarchy. Mira felt them pressing down on her, as though the past itself sought to crush her into the floor. The rival alphas had returned, cloaked in furs and resentment. Elder Vaughn's eyes glinted like cold steel as he addressed Tavian. Your Majesty, Vaughn began, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. Dregmar has stood because its rulers heeded the order of blood. Yet you spit on that order. You keep her at your side, an Omega whose presence stains this hall. Mira's spine stiffened, but Tavian's hand brushed hers beneath the table, a silent command to stay calm. He rose slowly, his shadow stretching long across the chamber. Stains are easily washed, Tavian said, his voice measured but sharp. Cowardice, however, lingers. Gasps rippled through the council. Mira watched him, proud and worried all at once. His words cut like blades, but she saw the tremor in his hand again when it curled into a fist at his side. His body bore the strain of constant war against his own mask. The rival alphas surged with protests. Vaughn slammed a fist to the table. If the king continues this madness, he will not only lose the respect of the packs, he will invite rebellion. A guard, emboldened by the elder's fury, stepped forward. His blade hissed as he drew it, steel catching the light. Mira froze. The man's eyes darted between Tavian and Mira. The unspoken threat lingered. Remove her, and order would return. But before Tavian could react, something inside Mira unfurled. It was not rage, nor fear. It was command. Raw, ancient, undeniable. Her lips moved before she realized what she was saying. Drop it. The word cracked through the hall like thunder. The guard stopped mid-stride. His hand shook violently as if fighting invisible chains. Then with a hollow clatter, the blade slipped from his grasp and struck the floor. His eyes glazed, the sharpness gone, replaced by a blank obedience that chilled the blood of every soul present. He stood there, chest heaving, yet utterly powerless. Silence fell. Mira's breath trembled in her chest. She had not shouted. She had not begged. She had spoken with the ease of ordering a cup of water, and he had obeyed. The counselors stared in horror. Whispers hissed around the chamber, sharp as knives. Witch. Cursed. Dangerous. Tavian did not move for several heartbeats. Then slowly, he turned to her, his eyes searching hers as though seeing her for the first time. His lips parted, barely audible, but enough for her alone. "You're not weak," he whispered. His hand trembled, but not from fear, from awe. "You're terrifying." Her chest tightened, her pulse hammering. She could not tell if his words steadied her or shattered her. Vaughn's face had drained of color. His voice, though low, carried venom. This abomination has no place in Dregmar. Do you not see, Majesty? She is not your Omega. She is your ruin." The other counselors nodded, some in fear, others in fervor. The chamber's air thickened with the realization that Mira was no longer an inconvenience. She was a threat greater than Tavian himself. Mira could feel it in the way their eyes pierced her. For the first time, it was not Tavian's throne they questioned. It was her existence. Tavian rose again, the wolf within him flashing in the cold gleam of his eyes. His voice thundered across the chamber. "Enough." The word rolled like a storm, silencing the whispers. He moved from the throne's dais to stand beside Mira, his hand resting firmly on her shoulder, claiming her before them all. "You fear her because you cannot control her. But Dregmar was never built on fear. It was built on power. And tell me, Elder Vaughn, whose power rings louder in this hall? Yours or hers?" Vaughn flinched, his jaw tightening. Mira's heart pounded. She wanted to shrink, to vanish into the stone, but another part of her, the part that had spoken with command, lifted her chin higher. The silence stretched long. None dared move. The blade still glimmered on the floor, a testament to what had just occurred. At last, Tavian spoke again, lower, colder. "The next man who raises steel against her will answer not to me, but to her." The words sent a ripple of dread through the chamber. For the first time in Dregmar's history, the council feared something more than their king. They feared his Omega. When the council was dismissed, Mira stumbled into the corridor, breath shuddering. Tavian followed, his cloak trailing behind him. She pressed her hands to the wall as though the stone could steady her. "What happened to me? Tavian, I didn't mean to." His hands caught hers, pulling them down, forcing her to meet his gaze. His voice was low, but fierce. "Don't apologize. Don't ever apologize for surviving. You think the prophecy is a curse, but Mira, it may be our salvation." She shook her head, panic clawing at her throat. "I controlled him. Tavian, I controlled him like he wasn't even a man. That isn't salvation. It's monstrous." His thumb brushed over her knuckles. "Monstrous to them, perhaps, but to me..." His voice faltered, then steadied. "To me, it is the first time I have seen hope that Dregmar might not devour us both." Her chest ached. His faith was a weapon as dangerous as her power. And yet, deep inside, beneath the fear, something darker stirred. A thrill she could not deny. The moment the guard's blade had fallen, she had felt it. The taste of command, the rush of being obeyed not by choice, but by nature itself. It terrified her, and it tempted her. The halls of Dregmar whispered still, carrying rumors already spreading like wildfire. By nightfall, every wolf in the kingdom would know. The king's Omega was not only unbowed, she was untouchable. The keep was no longer the same after the council chamber. By the time night cloaked Dregmar, the whispers had already swollen into storms. The corridors of stone, once filled only with the quiet shuffle of servants or the heavy tread of guards, now pulsed with murmurs. The Omega commands men. The king bows to her. The moon has cursed us all. Mira felt the weight of every stare as she walked. Tavian had ordered her protected at all hours, but that protection had sharp edges. Where once guards looked past her, now their eyes clung to her like blades. Not loyalty, surveillance. In the kitchens, conversations died when she entered. In the courtyards, wolves growled low as though testing the scent of her new power. Even within her chambers, the air felt watched, and somewhere in that uneasy stillness, something darker stirred. The red stair had always been more than stone. It was the spine of Dragmar, the crimson-veined marble stairway that wound down from the keep into the shadowed warrens of the lower city. Every conspiracy in the kingdom, whispered or shouted, had at some point crawled its way across those steps, and now it was there the plotters gathered. Beneath the glow of guttering lanterns, cloaked men and women leaned close, their words stitched in venom. "She bends wills," one hissed, spitting into the dirt. "No Omega should hold such power," another snarled. "She'll destroy him. And us." Their leader raised a hand, silencing the noise. A scarred man with eyes like glass beads, he spoke low. "Then she dies before the ceremony, quietly. So it looks like fate corrected itself." The others nodded. A conspiracy was born, bound in blood and silence. Mira did not yet know of the red stair gathering, but she could feel it in the marrow of her bones, the strange heaviness that pressed at her whenever eyes lingered too long. That evening, restless, she slipped from her chambers against Tavian's orders. She told herself she only needed air, space away from his gaze that both protected and suffocated her. But as she moved through the keep, cloaked in quiet, she realized something else pulled her. A tug, subtle but certain, like a memory guiding her feet. It led her downward, past the torches of the upper halls, past the wolf-etched doors, down the red stair. The city breathed differently here. Smoke and spice curled in the narrow streets. Laughter mixed with weeping. Coins clinked against knives, and the sense of roasting meat clashed with rot. The Crow Market, Dragmar's underbelly, where no law ruled but survival. It was there she met Etta Crow. Etta was known in stories told to children, the witch merchant, the crow-eyed woman who traded secrets heavier than gold. And in truth, the woman who stepped from the shadows lived up to every whisper. Her hair, black as midnight feathers, fell wild about her shoulders. Rings glittered across her hands, talons of silver and bone. Her eyes, sharp, hungry, knowing too much. "Little Omega," Etta crooned, her smile thin as a blade. "The moon pushes you into places you shouldn't be." Mira stiffened, pulling her cloak tighter. "How do you know who I am?" Etta laughed, low and rasping. "Every crow in this city calls your name now. Tavian's Omega, the one who bends wills. I know more than you do, girl, and I know what you seek." From the folds of her cloak, she drew a small locket, silver, tarnished, etched with symbols Mira had never seen yet felt she knew. The world seemed to stop as Etta opened it. Inside, pressed like a fragile flower, was a lock of dark hair bound with red thread. The moment Mira saw it, her knees weakened. A memory not her own spilled into her mind. A lullaby sung in the dark, the warmth of a woman's hand brushing hair from her brow, the scent of lavender and smoke. Her mother. Mira gasped, reaching as though the memory itself might vanish. But Etta snapped the locket closed, holding it just out of reach. "Yours," Etta whispered. "Blood to blood. The last breath of the woman who bore you. It is yours, for a price." Mira's throat worked. "What price?" Etta's smile widened. "A favor. One day when I call, you will answer. No questions, no refusals." Mira's mind raced. Tavian would kill her for even standing here. The council would burn her if they knew she sought out witches. But the pull of that locket was stronger than reason. The memory of her mother, the woman she had lost too young to even picture clearly, burned in her chest like fire. Slowly, she nodded. "Yes." Etta placed the locket in her palm. The silver was cold, but the moment her skin touched it, Mira's mind erupted. Visions cascaded, her mother's voice singing in the dark, hands weaving herbs into charms, eyes fierce with warnings whispered to shadows. You are not small, Mira. You are not meant to kneel. You are the breath the moon left behind. Mira staggered, clutching the locket to her chest, tears stinging her eyes. For the first time in years, she felt not alone, not cursed, but chosen. When the vision cleared, Etta was gone. Only crows lingered, perched along the eaves, watching with eyes too sharp to be birds. Mira walked back through the red stair, her steps unsteady, her mind aflame. The gift she carried was not brute strength. It was memory and will. She realized now why her voice could bend others. It was not power born of dominance, like an alpha's command. It was the weight of memory, of unseen roots stretching back through blood and fate, compelling the world to remember what should be obeyed. The guard in the council chamber had not bent to her voice alone. He had bent to the truth carried in her blood, and Dregmar would never understand it. At the top of the red stair, Tavian soldiers found her. Their faces were pale, their words clipped as they demanded she return. She clutched the locket tight, hiding it beneath her cloak, and followed them back. She did not see the cloaked figures watching from the stair's shadows. The assassins, the first tendrils of the conspiracy that bore the red stair's name. Their eyes gleamed as she vanished into the keep. She walks willingly, one whispered. Good, another said. The trap waits. The red stair had claimed its prey, and Mira, breath of prophecy, Omega who would not kneel, had stepped straight into its snare. The keep had dressed itself in fire. Every torch, every brazier along the fortress walls had been lit, blazing against the night. Thousands gathered in the courtyards below, their faces lifted to the heavens where the red moon bled across the sky like a wound. The blood moon ceremony came but once in a generation, the vow that bound the Alpha King to his fated mate, securing not only his throne but the will of the moon itself. Tonight, it was Tavian's moment, and Mira's. Yet as the drums thundered and the horns cried their brazen notes, Mira felt the silver locket hidden against her breast, pulsing faintly as if it carried a heartbeat not her own. Her mother's memory clung to her like a veil. You are not meant to kneel. You are the breath the moon left behind. Tavian waited at the base of the vow steps, towering in his ceremonial cloak of black fur and crimson silk. A circlet of iron rested on his brow, but his eyes, storm-dark, unyielding, remained fixed on Mira. When she appeared at the top of the stair, the crowd gasped, not because she was draped in wealth, but because she wasn't. Her gown was simple, white as new snow, a single braid falling across her shoulder. No jewels, no crown, only the unshakable fire in her gaze. And the people murmured, because fire was not meant to live in an Omega's eyes. The High Council flanked the dais. Elder Vaughn scowled openly, his hands tight around the staff he carried. Beside him, Matron Helise whispered to Chancellor Vare, their eyes sharp with schemes half buried beneath ritual pomp. Rival alphas Armand Voss and Kestrel Thorne stood with arms crossed, wolves at their heels, their presence meant to show strength, but their stares meant only for Tavian, measuring, waiting. The drums ceased. The crowd held its breath. Tavian lifted his hand, calling Mira to descend. Her steps were steady, though every nerve within her trembled. She remembered the market's shadows, Etta Crow's grin, the conspirators whispering unseen. Something felt wrong tonight. The locket seemed to pulse harder, as though warning her. When she reached him, Tavian extended his hand. She placed hers within it. His palm was warm, calloused, grounding her against the storm of eyes. Together they ascended the vow steps to the dais, where the binding words awaited. The red moon loomed massive above them, casting its light across the stone. The elders intoned the ancient verses, voices echoing as though the keep itself repeated the words. In blood we rise, in vow we bind, alpha and mate, strength and breath, the moon bears witness. Tavian's grip tightened on Mira's hand. He turned to face her fully, and though the ritual demanded stoicism, his storm-gray eyes betrayed something rawer. Need, fear, devotion. His voice rang clear over the assembly. Mira of the Lowborn, Omega of Dregmar. By the moon's decree, I take you as mine, my strength, my heart, my vow. Gasps rippled through the crowd at his boldness. He did not soften her identity, did not polish her with titles. He named her exactly as she was, and claimed her before all. Mira's breath caught, the words pressed against her chest, heavy with both chains and wings. She opened her mouth to answer, to give the vow in return. But the night split apart. A whistle, a flash. The first arrow screamed through the air. Tavian moved before thought, dragging Mira to him, cloak flaring. The shaft thudded into his shoulder, punching through muscle and fur. He grunted, staggering but unyielding. Chaos erupted. Screams tore from the crowd. Wolves snarled. The elders shrieked and scrambled. More arrows rained, black-fletched, tipped with silver sheen. Guards raised shields, too late to stop the first blood. "Tavian!" Mira's cry ripped from her throat as she felt his weight against her. His blood seeped hot through the cloak. Assassins burst from the edges of the courtyard, masked figures wielding curved blades, moving with the precision of men long prepared. The Red Stair conspiracy had revealed itself. Steel clashed as Dregmar's soldiers surged forward. Rival alphas watched, hesitation flickering. Intervene, or let fate spill the king's life before their eyes. Tavian tore the arrow from his shoulder with a savage snarl, his free arm wrapping around Mira, shielding her as another shaft hissed past. His voice was low, feral. "Stay with me." But Mira felt the tremor in him. His strength was vast, yet even kings bled, and she saw the council's eyes, Vaughn's satisfaction, Helice's sharp, hungry watchfulness. They had expected this. The assassins stormed the steps, blades raised. Mira's hand flew to the locket at her breast. It seared her palm, and with it came a rush. Memory, not hers, but her mother's. A night of fire. A voice chanting words to bind spirits. A command sharper than steel. The nearest assassin lunged. Mira's voice rose, unbidden, carrying the weight of centuries. "Stop!" He froze mid-strike. His blade hovered inches from her throat. His eyes wide, glazed. The crowd gasped as if the moon itself had cracked. Tavian, blood staining his cloak, turned to see the frozen assassin, Mira standing unbowed before him, her command alive in the air. Even in pain, his eyes burned with awe, but around them the battle raged. Not all assassins faltered. Some broke through, cutting down guards, driving toward the dais. The vow steps ran slick with blood. Tavian tightened his hold on Mira, his voice a growl through clenched teeth. "The ceremony isn't ended. They want me weak. They want you gone." His knees threatened to buckle, yet his will burned. He looked at her as though she were no longer his Omega, but his equal in war. "Finish it, Mira. Speak the vow. Bind us now." Mira's throat closed, words tangling in the storm of screams, steel, and fire. To bind under blood and betrayal? Could the moon itself accept such a vow? The red moon burned brighter overhead as if demanding her answer, and beneath its gaze, Mira realized the truth. Vows spoken in peace were fragile. Vows spoken in blood could never be broken. She drew in a breath, eyes locked on Tavian's. "Tavian of Dregmar, Alpha King, by the moon's decree, I take you as mine, my strength, my heart, my vow." Her words rang like steel through the chaos. The moment she spoke, the moon's crimson light flared, engulfing them both. A surge of energy snapped through the air, visible as a shockwave that rattled the very stones. The assassins closest to the dais were flung back as though struck by invisible hands. The ground trembled. Wolves howled in unison, their cries a chorus under the blood moon. But Tavian staggered, his wound spilling crimson across his cloak. The vow bound him. Yes, but blood still leaked from the mortal vessel of the king. Mira caught him as he sagged, her small frame bearing his weight against her shoulder. Around them the battle still raged, and above the conspirators watching from the shadows of the red stair whispered to one another, "Not enough. He still breathes." Then strike again, before the vow strengthens them both. The ceremony had begun as a crowning. It ended as a battlefield. And Mira, bound by vow, blood on her hands and fire in her veins, knew this night was only the beginning of Dregmar's unraveling. The world seemed to split open beneath the red moon. The ceremony platform, built from centuries-old stone, was drenched in blood. Tavian lay slumped against the vow pillars, his hand pressed hard to his side, dark crimson leaking through his fingers. The crowd screamed and surged back in waves of panic, nobles shoving commoners, guards raising blades far too late. And in the center of it all, Mira stood motionless, her pale gown soaked scarlet where Tavian's blood had sprayed across her. Her hair clung to her cheek, her breath ragged, not from fear but from a fire that was no longer hidden. The assassins closed in, 10 of them, alpha-born, their scent undeniable. Warriors bred for killing, their eyes shining with the cold certainty of men who had slain kings before. One lunged. Mira's hand lifted, shaking only once before she steadied it. Her voice, quiet at first, cut through the screams and the clash of steel. "Kneel." It wasn't shouted. It wasn't begged. It was spoken like fact. The first assassin froze mid-stride, his blade catching the light of the torches as his knees slammed to the stone. Then another. Then another. Within seconds, the impossible rippled through the air. Every assassin, one by one, collapsing onto both knees before her. Their snarls turned into strained silence, their bodies straining against a command they could not resist. The crowd went still. The screams cut off as if smothered by an unseen hand. All eyes fixed on her. The Omega, the weak one, the one they had mocked, doubted, dismissed. And yet here she was, with nothing but her voice, bending alphas to their knees. Whispers crawled like wildfire through the assembly. The Omega commands alphas. She is no Omega. Prophecy. Queen of ruin. The counselors shifted uneasily, Matron Halise paling, her fan trembling in her hand. Chancellor Vare's lips pressed thin, his calculating eyes unable to disguise their fear. Rival alphas stood stiff as statues, hands twitching toward their swords, but none dared move closer, not with the assassins on the floor like broken dolls before her. Tavian tried to push himself upright, his body betraying him, his face pale, but his eyes locked on her. "Mira." His voice rasped, half awe, half plea. He had fought wars, broken armies, silenced rivals with fear, but even he had never seen such a thing. Mira turned slowly, her gown whispering against the stone. The moon bathed her in red, her shadow stretching long and terrible behind her. She looked at the kneeling assassins, their teeth bared, veins standing out as they fought an invisible leash they could not break. Her eyes burned with a new clarity. This wasn't Tavian's crown. This wasn't the council's throne. This power was hers. "You came to kill me," she said, voice cold enough to frost the air. "But I am not the prey here." One assassin choked out words through clenched teeth. "You shouldn't exist." His body convulsed as he tried to rise, but the command still shackled him, pressing him harder into the stone until his forehead touched the ground. The crowd gasped. Tavian's generals, hardened men who had fought beside him through endless campaigns, exchanged glances of unease. Even they, alpha-born to their marrow, felt a tremor of something deep inside, something pulling at their will, whispering at the edges of obedience. Mira's voice sharpened. "Tell me who sent you." The kneeling assassins trembled, their eyes glassing over as if memory itself bent to her command. One spoke in a flat, unearthly tone. "The red stare, the council's shadow, the Voss line rises." Armand Voss, one of the rival alphas, stiffened in the crowd, his name now a blade pointed at his own throat. Gasps and curses spread like cracks through glass. The people turned, all at once, to him. Voss's jaw clenched, but his hand did not reach for his weapon, not with Mira's gaze sweeping toward him like the strike of a wolf's fangs. Then Mira faltered, not in strength but in realization. She could feel their minds bending, their memories bleeding into her. Flashes, not hers, burned across her vision. A child screaming in a burning house, a wolf chained in silver, blood packs sworn under shadowed skies, the assassins' pasts, their secrets, their sins, all pressing into her skull until she staggered. The people gasped, thinking she might collapse. Tavian tried to rise again, his voice breaking. "Mira!" But she didn't fall. Instead, she steadied herself, her spine straightening, her chin lifting as if the weight of every memory, every chain, every prophecy now belonged to her. Her eyes glowed with something otherworldly as she whispered again. This time, the words not for the assassins but for the world itself. Kneel. And this time, it wasn't just the assassins. Across the plaza, dozens of alphas in the crowd felt their knees weaken. Some resisted, panting through clenched teeth. Others buckled fully, collapsing before they understood why. Mothers clutched children to their skirts. Men dropped their goblets and banners, silence crashing down heavier than thunder. The Omega had spoken, and the world had obeyed. Above them, the red moon swelled. And for the first time in generations, the ceremony platform did not belong to Tavian, the Alpha King. It belonged to Mira. The silence after Mira's command clung to the air like smoke after a wildfire. The assassins were still bound to the stone, trembling and broken. Tavian's blood still seeped into the vow steps, and yet, all that anyone could speak of was her, the Omega who made Alphas kneel. By dawn, the kingdom was a storm of whispers. The streets of Verathani thrummed with rumor. Taverns, barracks, even sanctuaries, all echoed with her name. Some spoke of her as salvation, others as an omen of the end. But within the high hall, there was no awe, only fear. The council of elders gathered in the chamber of crowns, their robes dragging across the marble floor like black waves. Torches hissed against the damp air as Chancellor Vare rose from his seat, his thin hands folded, his voice laced with honeyed venom. You all saw it. Not a sword raised, not a claw bared, and yet alphas bent before her. This is not the blessing of the moon. This is the corruption of it. Matron Helisa's fan snapped open, the soft fluttering sound masking the tremor in her breath. If an Omega can strip alphas of their will, then our laws are ash. She must be contained. Contained. The words slithered like poison through the chamber. A few of the younger counselors shifted uneasily, eyes darting to the great doors as though Tavian himself might stride in and tear the chamber apart. But Tavian was not there. He was still in his chambers, fevered from his wound, refusing to rest, demanding reports of Mira's safety. It was the perfect opening. Vare raised his hand, drawing every gaze. We are the keepers of balance. The Alpha King bleeds. The Omega bends nature itself. If we do nothing, crown and kingdom alike will fall into chaos. Thus, by our right as elders, we decree, the girl must undergo purification. The Sunclave temple awaits. No one dared challenge him outright. Not yet. Mira was taken under the shroud of night. She did not fight when the guards came, though every instinct screamed at her to burn the command into their skulls to make them kneel like the assassins. But Tavian's bloodied face haunted her. His plea, Mira, was still a knife in her chest. If she used her power again, would they call her savior or monster? The Sunclave Temple loomed on the eastern cliffs of Verathani, its spires carved from white stone that glowed under the moonlight. To the people it was sacred. To Mira, it felt like a cage. They sealed her in a sanctum draped with silver chains, their links carved with runes that prickled against her skin. The elders whispered words of cleansing, speaking of the moon's grace as though she had somehow defiled it. She sat in silence, staring at the polished floor, the scent of incense thick and suffocating. She thought of Tavian, whether he still lived, whether he believed in her, whether she would ever see him again. But fear was not all that filled her. Beneath it, a different fire flickered, a defiance. She remembered the assassins' foreheads pressed to stone, the ripple of silence when she had spoken. She remembered power, raw and undeniable. They feared her, and fear, she realized, was its own crown. In the king's chambers, Tavian tore the bandages from his wound before the healers could protest. His skin was pale, his breath ragged, but his eyes burned with fury brighter than the fire in the hearth. "They took her," he growled, voice rough. Soren Pike, his scout and most trusted blade, stood stiff at his side. "The elders claim it is purification, my king. They call it necessary." Tavian's fist crashed into the oak table, splintering wood. Necessary? To lock her away? To chain her like an animal? She bled for this kingdom. She bled for me. His chest heaved, his voice breaking, raw and guttural. "And I will not let them break her." His generals exchanged uneasy glances. They had seen Tavian rage in battle, his temper like lightning. But this was different. This was not the fury of a king protecting his crown. It was the fury of a man protecting what he could not live without. He turned, his bloodied hand pointing toward the door. "Gather the banners. If one hair on her head is harmed, I will burn their temple to the sea." Meanwhile, in the Sunclave temple, Mira knelt on the cold marble floor, her wrists raw from the silver chains. The matrons of purity circled her, chanting in low tones. They burned sage, pressed bowls of salt water to her lips, and whispered prayers meant to wash away corruption. Mira let them. Her eyes stayed down, her body still. But inside, her mind clawed against the walls. She could hear it again, the voices, echoes, memories not her own, seeping into her bones. The assassins, the guards, even the matrons themselves, their fears, their secrets, their sins. "You will not break me," she whispered into the incense haze, her voice unheard beneath the chants. And for a heartbeat, one of the silver chains trembled. The kingdom shifted uneasily under the weight of it all. To some, Mira was the prophecy's breath. To others, she was doom wrapped in silk. But no one could ignore her. And in the heart of the palace, Tavian sharpened his rage into a blade, ready to carve through council, temple, and prophecy alike. For the first time in centuries, the Alpha King's throne trembled, not from enemies beyond the walls, but from fear of the Omega who wore no crown, and yet already ruled. The Sunclave temple was quiet in ways that felt unnatural, not the soft quiet of a forest at dusk, nor the reverent hush of a chapel. It was a silence built of stone and centuries, heavy, deliberate, suffocating. Every echo of Mira's breath seemed too loud, every scrape of chain against marble too sharp. The incense had long since burned out, leaving only the metallic tang of silver pressing into her skin. She had stopped fighting the chains hours ago, or was it days? The light from the narrow slits of windows told her little. Sometimes moon, sometimes sun, sometimes both hidden by storms. Time inside the sanctum did not flow, it pooled, stagnant, waiting. But her mind did not rest. The elders thought silence and stone would break her. They were wrong. Silence had teeth, yes, but she had learned to listen to it, to the whispers tucked inside it, the voices. At first they had frightened her, memories that weren't hers bleeding into her skull. A guard's regret over a daughter left in some border village, a matron's hidden affair, the assassin's oath sworn in blood. But the longer she stayed, the more she understood. The voices weren't curses, they were fragments of power, echoes buried deep in her blood. And then she saw it. Not with her eyes, but in the seam of stone directly behind the altar. The wall itself pulsed faintly, a breath no one else could hear. When the matrons left her to her solitude, Mira crawled closer, chains dragging across marble like the hiss of serpents. There, carved into the stone, almost lost beneath centuries of soot and moss, was an inscription. She traced it with her fingertip, her pulse quickening as the letters revealed themselves. The first omegas ruled not by claw, but by command. Her breath caught. Not by claw. Not by claw. The words pulsed through her veins, louder than her heartbeat. It was no mistake, no corruption. What she had done at the ceremony wasn't blasphemy. It was heritage. Truth buried because it terrified those who clung to crowns. Her chains rattled as her hands trembled against the stone. For the first time since they'd locked her in this sanctum, Mira smiled, small, sharp, and dangerous. The sound of the sanctum doors creaking shattered her focus. The chains burned her wrists as she jerked upright, expecting another matron, another chant. But it was neither priestess nor guard who stepped through. It was Etta Crow. She moved like a shadow wearing flesh, her cloak stitched with raven feathers that shimmered in the candlelight. Her eyes, sharp, black as coal, clever as a thief's, swept over Mira as if measuring her strength, her weakness, her worth. "You found it," Etta murmured, nodding toward the inscription. Her voice carried a husky amusement, the kind that never gave away whether she was mocking or admiring. Not all omegas would have noticed. Most would have wept themselves to sleep by now. Mira's chest tightened. "You." Etta smiled faintly. "Yes, me. I told you, didn't I? Crow market trades never come cheap. I gave you your mother's memory. In exchange, you owe me a favor. And sooner than you think, Mira of No House." The weight of her words pressed down harder than the chains. Mira remembered the locket, the flash of her mother's laugh, the warmth of a face she'd thought lost forever. It had been a cruel gift, beautiful, priceless, but bound in threads of debt. "What do you want?" Mira asked, her voice sharper than she felt. Etta circled her like a wolf testing a new rival. "Want? Many things. But for now, I want you to remember this. The council, the king, the whole rotting structure of this kingdom will do what it always does. Use you until you break. Tavian's love may feel like salvation, but it is a chain too, softer than these." She tapped the silver links binding Mira's wrist with one long finger. But a chain nonetheless. Mira's throat tightened. She wanted to deny it, to shout Tavian's name as if that could banish the doubt. But Etta's words dug too deep. "You think he will burn the council for you?" Etta continued. "Perhaps he will. But then what? You'll be his prize. His omega with power he does not understand sitting at his side while men plot in his shadow. You'll never be free, not truly. Not until you stop bending your choices around him." The words stung because they were true. Tavian had defended her, yes. He had bled for her, yes. But every time she breathed, it was in the shape of his crown. Etta leaned close, her lips brushing Mira's ear. The first omegas ruled, not beside alphas, not beneath them, alone. Mira shivered, not from fear, from the possibility those words ignited. Then, as swiftly as she came, Etta slipped back toward the sanctum door, her cloak whispering across the marble. "Choose carefully, Mira. The world is bending toward you. Bend with it. Or break." The heavy doors shut behind her, and Mira was alone again. But the silence was different now. It wasn't suffocating. It was alive, pulsing, brimming with the weight of choice. She lay back against the cold stone, eyes fixed on the carved words until they blurred, not by claw, but by command. Her mind spun. Tavian's face rose again in memory, his fury, his tenderness, his vow to burn the council if she was harmed. And God, she wanted to believe him, to lean into him, to let his strength hold her when her own faltered. But beneath that yearning was something else, a flicker of doubt, a question she had never dared form until now. What if her destiny was not beside Tavian at all? What if it was apart from him? She closed her eyes, and for the first time since being chained, she whispered not a vow but a promise to herself. I will not kneel to them, not to the council, not even to the crown. Her hands curled into fists, the silver biting deep. Pain lanced through her palms, grounding her. Chains could bind her body, but her will was already slipping free. Mira did not know yet what path she would take, but she knew one thing with a certainty that burned hotter than fire. When she chose, it would not be for Tavian. It would be for herself. The Sunclave Temple was never meant for visitors. Its sanctum was sealed, its wards older than Tavian's throne itself. Yet one evening, as the last light bled over the cliffs and the candles sputtered low, Mira heard the iron groan of the doors. It was not a matron this time. A figure entered with the confidence of a man who had never been denied a threshold. His cloak was wolf gray, the crest of thorns stitched into its clasp, a crescent blade across a field of black. His eyes were the color of a winter sky, piercing and calculating. Kestrel Thorn, alpha of the northern marches, rival to Tavian, the one whose silence during the council debates had been more dangerous than the shouts of others. He was not a man who wasted words or appearances. The guards did not resist him. They bowed. Mira stiffened against the chains, watching him approach with a slow, measured stride. Every step echoed through the chamber, deliberate, claiming the space as his own. You, she whispered. Me, Kestrel replied softly, with a half-smile that carried both arrogance and charm. And you, Mira of No House, who made alphas kneel. His eyes flicked to the silver bindings around her wrists. And yet, here you are, chained like an animal, while the man you love rages himself hoarse in his hall. Mira's breath caught at his words, but she did not speak. She waited. She wanted to see what game he played. Kestrel lowered himself to one knee, not in reverence but in deliberate mimicry of her power. You command, Mira. You are no Omega. You are something the council fears so much they'd rather bury you than let you breathe. Tavian would have you as his queen, yes. But even as queen, you'd live in his shadow. His wars, his crown, his endless weight. And tell me... His gaze sharpened, slicing through her silence. Is that what you want? To be the jewel on his throne? Or do you want more? The question pierced her. Because hadn't she already wondered it herself? Hadn't she already whispered, alone in the dark, that her choices could not belong to Tavian alone? Her throat tightened. What are you offering, Kestrel? He leaned closer, his voice low, dangerous. An alliance, you and me. My armies, your command. No council, no crown that treats you like a weapon to be locked away. Rule beside me, as equals. Free. The word hung between them. Free. It tasted of fire and wind, of unchained skies. For a moment Mira saw it, herself on a throne not built of Tavian stone, but of her own making. Her voice turning armies into ash, her will bending crowns into dust, and Kestrel, ruthless, cunning, unflinching, standing beside her, not above. Her pulse quickened, but then she saw Tavian's face, not the king's mask, but the man who had held her hands trembling after the ambush, who had whispered her name like a vow. She saw him bleeding on the vow steps, reaching for her even when his body failed, and she knew she could not trade that for Kestrel's steel smile. Mira's voice steadied. You think I'd abandon Tavian for you? Kestrel's smile didn't falter, but his eyes darkened, the faintest twitch betraying irritation. I think you're smarter than to chain your future to a king already crumbling beneath his own counsel. Mira straightened despite the chains, her chin lifting. I will not kneel to Tavian, but I will not kneel to you either. Silence. Then Kestrel laughed softly, the sound rich and unsettling. Good. I wouldn't want a queen who knelt. He rose, sweeping his cloak over his shoulder. Think on it, Mira. Tavian cannot save you from the council. He cannot save you from what you are. But I can give you space to breathe, to become. Before she could reply, he turned and strode out, the heavy doors booming shut behind him. That night, Mira could not sleep. Her dreams twisted with the echo of Kestrel's words. Freedom, choice, power. And yet every time she began to imagine herself beside him, Tavian's voice cut through. Mira. Her chest ached with the split inside her. Tavian did not know of Kestrel's visit. Not yet. But he felt the shift in the air when the council summoned him the next morning. The chamber was ripe with tension, Vere's thin smile stretched too wide, Helice's fan fluttering too quickly. Chancellor Vere's words slithered like oil. We permitted one of your rivals an audience with the girl, Lord Thorn to be precise, a reasonable precaution, to see if she would bend to diplomacy rather than force. Tavian froze. His knuckles whitened on the armrest of his throne. You let Kestrel into her cell? The counselors exchanged wary glances, but none denied it. Rage erupted in Tavian's chest like fire on dry grass. His voice boomed, shaking the chamber. She is mine. Not as a possession, but as bond, as vow. And you let my rival whisper poison in her ear? Some counselors shrank, but others, emboldened, pressed forward. She is dangerous, Helice said, her voice sharp as her fan snapped shut. She commands alphas. She could unmake kingdoms with a word. Do you not see, Tavian? She is more threat than mate. Tavian rose, his height casting a shadow over them all. His hand trembled, not with weakness this time, but with fury he could barely contain. If you dare speak of her as weapon or threat again, I will tear this chamber down stone by stone. But even as he thundered, a flicker of doubt gnawed at him. Had Mira listened to Kestrel? Had she been tempted? The thought lodged deep in his heart, a thorn he could not pull free. Back in the temple, Mira pressed her forehead to the cool stone of the inscription, whispering the words again. The first Omegas ruled not by claw but by command. Her hands ached from the chains, her heart ached from Tavian's memory, and her mind burned with Kestrel's offer. For the first time she realized the truth. It was not just her enemies who wanted her power. It was Tavian too. That night Tavian could not sleep. He paced the length of his chambers, his generals silent as statues nearby. Every step echoed with jealousy, fear, and love, twisted into something darker. And for the first time since his rise to the throne, Tavian Morik, Alpha King, doubted if his mate would still choose him when the chains were broken. The council chambers smelled of incense and old parchment, but beneath it all was the stench of scheming. Tavian had not sat since dawn. He stood at the center of the great floor, his cloak thrown back, his hands clenched behind him, his eyes blazing toward Chancellor Vere. The man's voice was velvet stretched over iron, every word measured and deliberate. A prophecy has resurfaced, my king, hidden deep within the codices of the first howl. It speaks of an Omega who will rise with power unnatural. Her bond to the throne will not strengthen it, but break it. Her love will be the crown's undoing. Whispers crackled among the elders like dry leaves in wind. Some gasped. Others smirked as though they had long suspected. Tavian's body went rigid. He did not answer immediately, because he knew if he spoke too soon he might put his fist through Vere's throat. His voice, when it came, was low and lethal. You dare spit riddles and call them law? Vere inclined his head, calm as a man standing at the edge of a cliff but certain the stones beneath him would hold. I dare speak what was written, my king. We only seek to protect the realm from ruin. Protect. The word twisted Tavian's rage sharper. He turned his back on them, his cloak snapping with the movement. Protect? They were not protecting the realm. They were protecting themselves, from Mira, from what she was. And still, the words burrowed deep. Her bond will destroy the crown. The thought was poison. He tasted it in his throat, bitter, corrosive. That evening, Tavian did what he had sworn never to do. He entered the Sunclave Temple without herald, without restraint. Guards bowed but dared not stop him as he pushed open the doors, his stride thunderous, his aura filling the chamber before his voice ever did. Mira lifted her head from the inscription, her chains rattling softly. For a moment, the sight of him struck her breathless. The man, not the king. His hair unbound, his eyes fierce, his presence like a storm barely held together. But the storm was not for her enemies this time. It was for her. Tavian stopped a few feet from her, his chest heaving as though every breath was a war. He looked at her not with tenderness, but with something rawer, harsher, scraped down to bone. "They tell me," he began, his voice breaking like steel under too much weight, "that your bond to me will destroy my throne." Mira froze. "What?" "They whisper prophecy. They feed me lies dressed as destiny. And yet," his voice cracked again, then hardened, "and yet I cannot stop hearing it. I cannot stop seeing him, Kestrel, in this very chamber, whispering poison in your ear." Her lips parted. She wanted to deny it. To tell him the words Kestrel had said meant nothing. But she remembered the truth. She had listened. She had been tempted. Tavian stepped closer, his shadow swallowing hers, his eyes burning into hers with desperate fury. "Tell me, Mira. Tell me you never thought of walking away." The chains felt suddenly heavier on her wrists. Her throat tightened. She searched for the words. Any words. A denial. A promise. A vow. But nothing came. Her silence filled the temple louder than screams. Tavian's breath left him in a shudder, as though she had struck him across the chest. His hand twitched at his side, aching to reach for her, aching to pull her close, to hold her until the world itself fell silent. But her silence had already answered him. She had thought of it. She had imagined another path. His fury cracked under the weight of grief, his eyes closing for just a heartbeat, and when they opened again, there was a fracture inside them that had not been there before. "You should have lied," he whispered. Mira's heart splintered. "Tavian!" But he turned, cloak snapping, shoulders taut, as though if he stayed another second he would break into pieces he could never gather again. The doors boomed shut behind him, leaving her in chains, her chest hollow, her soul screaming with all the words she had not said. Outside, Tavian strode down the temple steps as if hunted by demons. His generals followed at a wary distance, sensing that to approach was to risk being torn apart. The city watched their king stalk through the streets, the man who had once seemed untouchable, unshakable, now a figure carved out of rage and despair. By the time he reached the castle, Tavian's jaw ached from clenching, his hands raw from nails digging into palms. He tore the crown from his head and hurled it across the chamber. It struck the stone with a ringing crack, rolling to a stop at Vare's feet. The chancellor bent slowly, picking it up with long, skeletal fingers. "You see, my king," he murmured. "The prophecy is already at work. She weakens you. She divides you." Tavian's roar shook the walls. "She is mine." Vare only bowed, but his smile was the kind that carried victory hidden behind courtesy. Back in the temple, Mira pressed her head to the inscription, her tears wetting the ancient stone. The first Omegas ruled not by claw, but by command. But what command had she now? Chains. Doubt. A silence that had carved Tavian's heart in two. She had thought silence would protect him from truth. Instead, it had destroyed something far greater than prophecy could ever write. His trust. That night, the kingdom slept uneasily. Rumors spread like fire in dry fields. Some said the Omega had betrayed the king. Some said the king had forsaken his mate. Others whispered of prophecies and curses, of crowns cracking under unseen weight. And in the highest chamber of the keep, Tavian stood at the window, the moonlight painting him silver. His hands gripped the stone sill until his knuckles blanched. For the first time in his reign, he was not certain if his greatest battle lay against his enemies or against the woman he loved more than his own throne. The night of the final ceremony dawned with a sky stained crimson. The blood moon hung low, as if the heavens themselves leaned in to witness what would unfold. Torches burned across the city, their flames restless in the wind, casting shadows that jittered like nervous hands. Every soul in the kingdom gathered at the great amphitheater, wolves and humans, nobles and commoners, elders cloaked in ceremonial gray. The throne was empty, but anticipation filled it. This was the night when vows would be sealed, when the Alpha King and his chosen mate would unite before gods and people alike. And yet, as Mira stood behind the veil of silken drapes that concealed the inner chamber, she felt no certainty, only the weight of decision pressing on her chest like a stone. Her chains were gone but not forgotten. She wore a gown of silver and midnight, each thread heavy with meaning, her hair braided into the crown of an Omega Queen. But her reflection in the polished bronze mirror showed not triumph, but sorrow. Naya Wren's warning echoed in her memory. You are the prophecy's breath, crown or ruin. Tonight, she had to choose which. Tavian entered the chamber before the heralds could announce him. He moved like a man forged in fire, his cloak trailing behind him, his crown set upon his head, though his face was pale with strain. His eyes found Mira instantly, drinking her in as though he had been wandering deserts without water. For a moment, silence swelled between them. The storm of the past weeks, betrayal, silence, broken trust, hung like invisible chains. Then he stepped closer. His voice was rough, a whisper carved out of smoke and gravel. Hug me once more. Finish the vow. The word struck her like an arrow. His hands trembled as he reached, though he tried to hide it. Tavian, Alpha King, unshaken by blades or armies, trembled only for her. Mira's throat burned. Tears gathered against her will, sliding hot down her cheeks. She stepped forward, slow as if wading through water, and pressed herself into his arms. His embrace was iron and desperation, holding her as though she might vanish if he let go. For one breath, one heartbeat, she wished she could stay there forever. That the world might stop spinning, that prophecy might shatter and leave them untouched. But forever was not theirs. Her lips brushed against his ear, her whisper softer than falling ash. Hug me once more, because after tonight, I won't be yours. Tavian stiffened, his arms crushed tighter around her, his body shaking as though the earth beneath him had split. What do you mean? He breathed. Mira, don't. But she pulled back, her eyes blazing not with fear but with clarity. For the first time she saw the truth of her gift, not as curse or burden, but as choice. She reached for his hand, guiding it to her chest, where her heart thundered. I love you, Tavian. That is the cruelest truth of all. But if I seal this vow, I bind you to ruin. The crown will fall with me, and I will not let my love destroy you. His breath broke. His jaw clenched, his eyes wild with pain. You think I care for crowns? For thrones? I would burn it all if it meant you stayed. And that, Mira whispered, tears streaking silver down her face, is why I must be the one to let go. The horn sounded. The time had come. Hand in hand, though torn in soul, Tavian and Mira stepped out into the amphitheater. Thousands of eyes turned to them, thousands of breaths caught. The moon bathed them in red light, the torches casting them as giants carved in flame. The elder officiant raised his staff. By vow and by blood, the Alpha King binds his mate. Speak the words, and let the bond seal. Tavian's voice cracked the air like thunder. He recited the first lines, his gaze locked on Mira, his tone both kingly command and desperate plea. The crowd roared approval, stamping their feet, calling for the bond. Then came Mira's turn. The words that would seal her to him forever, the words that would unite them in the eyes of gods and wolves alike. She lifted her chin, tears still glistening, her voice clear and steady. I will not speak them. Gasps tore through the amphitheater. Elders leaned forward, horrified. The crowd rippled like a disturbed sea. Tavian's head snapped toward her, his face a canvas of disbelief and raw agony. "Mira." But before he could speak further, Mira stepped forward, her voice ringing across the night. "I claim no vow. Instead, I sever it, by gift and by will." Her eyes burned silver, her power rising like a storm. She reached not with claws but with command, into the very bond between them. A hush fell so deep it seemed even the torches froze. "Release," she whispered. The invisible tether between Alpha and Omega snapped like a rope set ablaze. Tavian staggered, clutching his chest as if a blade had pierced through. A cry broke from his lips, not of rage, but of heartbreak. The crowd erupted. Some shrieked betrayal, others fell to their knees in awe. The prophecy was alive before them. The Omega who would not kneel had brought even their king to his knees. Tavian's crown slipped, striking the stone steps with a hollow clang. He did not reach for it. His eyes were only for Mira, standing before him, her gown billowing, her tears like stars against her cheeks. "You were my breath," he rasped, "my reason." "And you were mine," she whispered back. "But I will not let us be each other's ruin." The elders surged forward, shouting for her capture. Guards hesitated, torn between command and awe. Some even dropped their blades as if her will still coiled around their minds. Mira lifted her hands, her voice carrying through the chaos. "I am not your queen. I am not your curse. I am your mirror. And if you fear me, then you fear yourselves." Gasps, cries, silence. She turned once more to Tavian. For a heartbeat it seemed she might run to him, that she might take it all back. But then she stepped away from him, away from the throne, away from the path carved for her. The amphitheater split in uproar. Tavian fell to one knee, not out of weakness, but because his heart had been cleaved in two. And Mira walked into the crimson night free, but leaving devastation in her wake. Thus ended the ceremony. Not with a crown, not with a vow, but with a severing. A love undone, a kingdom broken open, a prophecy awakened in truth. But the story was not over. For love severed can twist into war, or into something even stranger. The amphitheater still trembled from the echo of Mira's words. The vow had not been sealed, the bond had not been forged. Instead, before the eyes of gods and wolves, she had broken it, severed the thread that fate itself had woven. Tavian staggered as though struck by lightning. His knees hit the stone steps, the crack ringing louder than any war drum. His hand clutched his chest, but not from pain, from the sheer enormity of what she had done. His breath left him ragged, shallow, as though she had stolen the air itself from his lungs. His crown lay forgotten at his feet, a golden relic that no longer seemed to matter. Mira did not look back. Each step she took away from the throne was an act of defiance, not against Tavian, but against the chains of prophecy, the suffocating grip of the council, the destiny others had written for her. The crowd did not know whether to wail or to worship. Some screamed, "Traitor!" until their throats were raw. Others fell to their knees, voices rising in unison. "The Omega who wouldn't kneel! The Omega who wouldn't kneel!" The chant swelled, filling the night sky, climbing higher than the torches and banners, echoing against the very bones of the mountains. Tavian's vision blurred. He saw her form recede through the crimson haze, her silver gown gleaming like moonlight torn from the heavens. Each pace she put between them felt like a blade pressed deeper into his chest, not killing him, but carving him open. Yet even as agony coursed through him, awe shadowed it. She had done what no Omega, no mate, had ever dared. She had broken not just a vow, but a kingdom's expectations. She had shattered him, but she had freed herself. And he, the Alpha King, could only kneel and watch. The elders surged toward the steps, their voices shrill, their hands clawing for control. Chancellor Vere spat venom, his robe whipping around him as he barked orders. "Seize her! Seize the witch before the prophecy consumes us all." But the guards faltered. They had seen her command alphas with a single word. They had felt her power ripple like thunder through marrow and bone. Their hands shook on hilts, their knees bent as if unseen chains held them still. None moved to obey. Naya Wren, watching from the shadows, bowed her head. The prophecy breathes. Edda Crow smirked from the edges of the amphitheater, her dark eyes gleaming. The girl owes me a favor, she thought, and the night's chaos only deepened her amusement. Tavian finally rose, though the weight of his body felt unbearable. Each breath rasped like fire, each heartbeat a fracture. His generals moved to steady him, but he shoved them aside. He did not want steadiness. He wanted her. His gaze locked on Mira's retreating figure. The crowd surged and parted, making a path for her as if the very world knew it could not hold her back. "Wait," he whispered, but only the wind carried it. Mira paused at the far archway, her silhouette framed by the blood-red moon. For an instant, Tavian thought she might turn, thought her eyes might meet his one last time. But she did not. She stepped into the night, vanishing into darkness as though the world itself swallowed her whole. The amphitheater erupted into chaos. Shouts, chants, accusations. Some called Tavian weak, some called Mira divine. Others fled in terror of what the future might bring. Yet Tavian heard none of it. His ears rang with silence, his chest hollow. He dropped to the last step, his body folding forward, his hand pressed to the stone where she had stood only moments before. He whispered, voice cracked, meant only for himself, or perhaps for the gods. "She took my throne." His fingers curled into fists. "My heart." His head bowed, his shoulders trembling. "And my breath." The words bled from him like confession, like surrender, like love that could not be slain even by betrayal. The elders cried out for judgment, for new vows, for chains and crowns, for answers Tavian could not give. His people waited, but he did not rise. Not yet. He remained where Mira had left him, not as Alpha King, but as a man undone. For the first time since his ascension, Tavian was not seen as invincible. He was seen as mortal, human, in love with a woman who had unmade him, and the kingdom would never forget that sight. Far beyond the amphitheater, Mira walked alone through the city streets, the chant still ringing in her ears. The Omega who wouldn't kneel. They praised her, cursed her, exalted her, damned her. But she kept walking. Her tears fell silently, her hands trembling though her steps did not falter. She had chosen freedom, but freedom had torn the man she loved to pieces. She pressed her hand to her chest, feeling the echo of their severed bond still burning in her ribs. It was gone, but it had left behind an ache that might never heal. She whispered into the night, words Tavian would never hear. "I loved you too much to stay." Above them both the blood moon watched, a silent witness to love's undoing and destiny's cruel hand. The crown had not been sealed by vow, but broken by choice. And so the story ended not with triumph, nor with defeat, but with two hearts torn apart, each loving the other more fiercely than themselves. The Omega walked free. The Alpha remained bound, and the breathless crown, heavier than gold, sharper than steel, passed into legend.
Thank you, Untamed Hearts, for staying till the end. The story pauses, but the fire never dies. Here in Tales by Jenny Moon, the hunt only waits for the next night. If you survive this chapter, step deeper. Share your presence with the pack, so it knows who dares to return. Now that the journey has ended, what's your final thought on this story? Share it in the comments. I'm curious how it made you feel. The night never sleeps, and neither do the things within it. Rest if you must. Keep the moon close, and if you feel eyes on you, or a whisper at your door, don't panic. It's only a story, until the moon finds you.